Good morning, everybody. Okay, welcome to this class. It's class number 18. So today what I want to do is explain you how to do uploads to the Google Cloud, especially Google Cloud Storage, to put files there. Before I start, let me set up a moment. Are there any questions before I start? So my plan for the next classes is today to present Google Cloud Storage. We have a bit of soundtrack. No, yes, sorry. Are there any questions? Jokes aside. So, okay, my plan is to do today uploads to the Google Cloud Storage, and I want to talk about a new style of doing components that I'm exploring. The next class, I want to talk about how to put an application on the cloud for scalable serving. So everything you need essentially to put the code you have been developing in class so far to a production place where it's really stable and served all the time in a, with a scalable number of front servers. And then we have a last class. During the last class, I want to host the project presentations for the people who want to present the project before Finance Day. And I also want to, I don't know, it's a free class, so we can talk about what we want. So if you have special wishes, send me an email. So various things that we haven't done, I could talk about Stripe and how to implement payments. Maybe that would be a useful topic. I could also talk a moment about playing music files or video files using HTML5. That's what comes to my mind, essentially. So if you have preferences, let me know. I think maybe Stripe would be one of the most useful of these things to explain. Okay, so let's get into the topic for today's class. Stripe, as somebody says, yes. Yes, Stripe is actually kind of well done and fun. I have code already made for an older version of Stripe, the typical problem of computer science. This is what I love. Maybe I should teach theory classes again, in which if you define an automaton, it stays the way it is through the years. My problem with teaching computer science classes of the kind like this one is that the framework changes all the time. So all my code that uses Stripe that I used in classes in the past, I really have to wonder whether it still works or it will be completely changed and it uses new encryption libraries and whether I will get it to work. But maybe if I can get it to work, I can use it. I mean, Stripe is fairly well documented, so it should work. So Cian Cutler wants to Stripe. He wants to set up a business, which is a good thing to do. No, I don't know if he wants. Okay, so let's start the class. A moment, I want to share the screen. And maybe it's easier if I just share my my whole screen. Okay. So I need to be able to look at the participants again so that I can keep track of. And then okay, incredible. Okay, so so we discussed last time that uploading files requires a bit of special attention, okay? You cannot put files on the local file system of a server because it's not shared among the different servers. And you also cannot put files in the database because it would be a waste of very precious storage, right? Storage in a database is very expensive for a couple of reasons. The first one is that if you can, you typically buy flash storage for database servers that are SQL servers to be faster. And the second is that, quite aside from that, database servers such as MySQL or Postgres servers do a very good job at caching. And so you want those servers caching using RAM memory of what is on disk. And so what you should do is you should avoid putting big blobs of information in their memory, because one single file is going to displace a lot of data that otherwise could be cached, right? So essentially, the memory in a database server is kind of expensive, and you don't want to use it for that. So what do you do with your files? And the answer is both Amazon and Google have um, storage services that enable you to store and retrieve file-like objects. Okay, so you can upload a big bunch of bytes. They call it a blob often. You can upload a blob, the equivalent of a file, and once uploaded, you can serve it to people, and you can delete it, and you can manage who has access to it, etc., etc. So how do we do it from zero to completion? Okay, so the first thing you do is that, sorry, you create a project on the Google Cloud. You type console.cloud.google.com, and this gives you a choice of, it gives you an initial menu. You may or may not have already a project, and if not, you can click here and you can create a new project. So I have a project called the Luca Teaching, which I use for this, for examples for my classes, and I have a bunch of other projects. So there is a README file. So by the way, everything is, if you want to follow the class in real time by looking at the code, okay, my class is, all the material is already up in lecture 18. Okay, so you can download the code we actually use to sign URLs, app demonstrating use of signed URLs. So I wrote an app that you can download from Bitbucket, okay, and you can follow the class in this way. And in the static folder, there is a README file that explains, it's in components, GCS file upload, README file. There is a README file that explains some of the things, okay? Actually, since I mentioned it, let me upload it, update it right now. Okay, git status. Oh, I hate these Zoom things that are always between my feet. 1 second. Yeah, I made a branch called Code Grader in which I was trying to do other things. Let's leave the branches alone since what I have works, okay? So let me show you. I have a README file that essentially explains some of the initial steps to upload, to set up, okay? And I have a branch called Grader in which I'm experimenting with some features I want to add to the file uploader for Code Grader, essentially. So the first step is to, I'm sorry, create an app, and you need to enable billing. This is why I haven't given in a homework. I don't want 400 students to try to enable billing at the same time, and then there surely will be people who have problems because of they don't want to do it, or their credit card doesn't get accepted, and then it's too complicated to debug for homework. But if you want to use these, you need to create a storage bucket, and you need to enable billing on it. There is low enough quota that for playing with it, you basically pay $0. But Google wants to be able to charge you for use, because once you create these resources, it's up to you how to decide how much to upload to them, and so you can incur costs. Okay, so one of the things you need to do after you create the project and enable billing is that you need to create a bucket. So the organization of files in the Google Cloud Storage, and it's the same for S3, is this. There is a global namespace of buckets. Okay, these names of buckets are global throughout the whole Google Cloud. So I prefix my names in the Luca Teaching app with the Luca Teaching, because it appears there is no other Luca in the world that is teaching with the Google Cloud Storage. And so, you know, I can use that prefix. But for example, I could try to create a bucket called Luca de Alfaro. I haven't tried yet. But this is global. So if I create one, you cannot create one. If you create one, then I won't be able to have my Luca de Alfaro bucket anyway. Now, bucket names are actually not very important. They are typically not visible to the user, so you can choose whatever you want, okay? So let me show you the process of creating a bucket. So when you click on Create Bucket, you have to choose a globally unique name. Then you have to choose where to store the data. There is a primary region where to store data, and there are secondary regions. There are default storage classes for the data. So you can choose essentially, as I was mentioning last time, a trade-off between how fast do you want the retrieval to be, and how expensive you want the storage to be, okay? So I don't know if I can open this. Yeah, standard is done for files that you plan to read and write often. And then there is nearline, cold line, and archive. As you go down the list, essentially the storage gets cheaper, but the access gets longer in terms of latency, up to, you know, some tens of seconds, and more expensive, okay? So there are two prices that regulate how much you pay. One is the storage, and the other is the number of operations, okay? And as you go down this list, the storage becomes cheaper, but the operations become more expensive. So these are used essentially for archival purposes, right? If we want to build an archival system. And I think that Amazon pioneered, and Google later also is in the process of implementing, I don't know whether they already finished or not, a way in which they, if you haven't been using for a certain time, if you haven't been accessing a certain blob of information, they gradually bring it down in this hierarchy, so that your storage bill becomes cheaper, right? Right. So the idea is similar to when you have a house. You know, the things you use often you keep in the house, then you put them in the garage when you use them less often, and in the end you put them in the attic. You know, and fetching them is more complicated, but it's cheaper to store them, so to say. Okay. So it gives you some monthly cost estimate, etc., etc. I have to say, by the way, that whatever I'm teaching you in this class, I base it on the Google Cloud, because by tradition I'm a very heavy Google Cloud user. The two companies that I work on, CrowdGrader and Cameo, they're both built on the Google Cloud, and I built, you know, uncountably many things on the Google Cloud compared to the Amazon Cloud. You may ask why, and I think you know. There is simply a certain bias among people that came out of Google. I was in Google for 3 years. I took a leave of absence from UCSC, and I was there for 3 years. And Cameo is essentially founded by a person who was a VP at Google Maps. And so, you know, there is this sort of legacy. You have seen how things were done inside. You appreciated the infrastructure, and you think, you know, okay, surely the Google Cloud is great. And in fact, it is great in many ways. I'm not saying it's better, right? But it's certainly very good. And so, but the storage services in particular are very similar. Many products across the two clouds are similar, but the storage services in particular are very similar. S3 and GCS, S3 being the one of Amazon and GCS the one of Google, have very similar interfaces. So whatever I tell you about today, you can basically translate it immediately to S3. My code example works with Google Cloud, but you can reconstruct it quickly. Okay, so if I don't want to create a bucket, or you have it already created, you see I have a few buckets I use for teaching. The one I'm going to use today is called Luca Teaching Uploads. And you need to do a couple of other things before we are ready to start. Oh, so by the way, I chose fine-grained permissions, so I can choose the permissions of each file. I'm not particularly using these, but I prefer to use fine-grained permissions if I can. Then you need to do one thing. You need to go to your identity manager and create a service account. This you do it here. AIM and .min. AIM. You go here. Okay, I have a bunch of accounts. And I have to create one of these accounts, which I think I do by clicking here. No, sorry. Yeah, it's very confusing. This is a piece of the Google Cloud that confuses me the most. Service accounts. So you go to service accounts and you create a new service account, okay? The service account I created is called image uploader. What is a service account? So this is a common notion that goes throughout the cloud. It's not specific to Google Cloud Storage. Think at it in this way. You have on the Google Cloud many resources. You have a storage place, you have databases that you can use, you have Google Compute Engine, you have this and that, okay? So there are many resources. And now you must figure out a way to use them, to authorize use of them, right? For example, I can create a Google storage bucket, and then I want to use it for my laptop. So I need to somehow make sure that my laptop, which is just like a normal person's laptop, somehow is authorized to do this particular job, which is to access this Google Cloud Storage bucket and write, read, or maybe a combination of the two, these buckets, these files into it, right? So how do you essentially manage who has the right of doing what, okay? And the way this works is that Google works by accounts that can be either personal accounts. You know, I could use my my sort of Gmail identity, for example, or my ucc@edu identity. If I wanted to authorize a person that is logged in via a browser to do something, okay? So if you want to authorize people logged in via browser, you use their, you know, normal Google account. But if you want to authorize servers, what you do is you create service accounts. So the notion of a service account is an identity that servers can assume, servers meaning also your laptop, you know, is an identity that computational objects can assume in order to carry out operations in the Google Cloud and receive permission for it. So what I did is, you know, I have some accounts called Image Funny, Image Uploader, Test Account, but what I created is Image Uploader, okay? I think I created it especially for this year. I'm not quite sure, you know, I might have yeah, you know, when I forget about which one I'm using, I create a new one, I guess, which is not a great way. So when you create a service account, what you do is that you can download some keys in JSON format that you need to put inside your application, okay? So I don't know if by clicking here, yeah, I can create another key. I cannot, you know, replicate an old key, but I can create another key. And the key, I downloaded it in JSON and I put it somewhere, which is, I made a private folder in which I put my GCS keys in JSON format, okay? So this key is needed and will give me the authorization to actually access Google Cloud Storage from my laptop, okay? And if I deployed my application on a server, the server would have similarly authorization via this key that is written in this JSON file, okay? So if you want to ask questions, I can see no, I cannot see the hands up or down. Okay, but now I can. Okay, great. So once you do these, there is a couple of other tricks before you actually having business to work. So let me go a moment back to storage browser. So the other thing is that the service account per se, when you create it, it does not have any special permissions to anything. So what you have to do is that, and there is a lot of confusing documentation. The Google Cloud's bane, I find, is that there is multiple documentation in multiple places about the same thing, and not all the documentation is consistent. So it turns out the way to actually grant permissions to your bucket to the service account is this. You go to the browser, you see your bucket, look at teaching images, or actually look at teaching uploads. You click here, okay? You click on edit bucket permissions, okay? This gives you a bunch of permissions. And so I had to add a member. Okay, I wrote here the service account, and I selected a role for the service account that is cloud storage object admin. Okay, and here I added my service account. Okay, so I have already done it, so I don't want to redo it. But if you do, look at it a moment. This is my service account. Image uploader at lucateachingimgserviceaccount.com. So this is a service account for which I created the JSON keys and is able to do storage object admin. So it has full access to create, delete, read, write, etc. files into this bucket. Okay, that is a sort of the crucial piece. So now you have an account, you have a key for the account, and you have the permission to actually access the bucket. You can do almost everything except for one thing. Long time ago, I mean, actually not that long time ago, but I gave you a lecture on web security, right? In which I explained that there is something called CORS, which is, I always forget these acronyms, but is cross origin request slaughtering. No, it's not that. Okay, it's something related to that. But essentially, it is what it's used to authorize requests that do not come from the same host. Okay, and so the problem is that I want to organize a website that works as follows. In general, I should have a diagram really, but it didn't come to my mind to build one. But I want to make my site works as follows. There is my server, which will serve you a web page. This is the web page I will serve you. Okay, so you are loading it from my beautiful site that in this case is just my laptop. Okay, but this page is loaded to the from the laptop, and then I want this page. So what happens when I upload a file? I wanted to organize these. So the easy way to do it would be the following. The easy way to do it would be that the user uploads a file to my server, and then my server writes it on Google Cloud Storage. This is not so difficult to do, right? Because my server has the key to Google Cloud, to the account on Google Cloud Storage, so it could receive my upload request and then use the Google Cloud Storage Python library to perform the write. This would work, okay? And it would not be very difficult to write. By the way, if you are very curious, I'm writing a new interface layer to Google Cloud Storage that I will open source that makes it far more pleasant to read and write files and delete files on Google Cloud Storage, okay? Google has sometimes an art of making somewhat incomprehensible libraries for their cloud services. And so I'm writing interface layers for a few of them and open sourcing them, okay? But the easy way would be this. And in this case, I wouldn't need to do anything additional regarding permissions on the Google Cloud. But I don't want to do this. Why? Because just as databases are too expensive for me to waste them for storing files, so is my server too expensive for me to waste it by receiving file uploads. Okay? So you have to pay for each server that you keep up. Okay? And once you keep up a server, the bandwidth of the server is limited by two things. By the networking bandwidth it has. You know, each server has an internet connection and you can upload stuff to it at most at that speed. And the other restriction is which is perhaps more serious, is the server memory. So if you upload a file to me, I have to store it in memory for the brief time before I actually write it to Google Cloud Storage, okay? I could try to put it on disk, but there is gonna be some point in which the file is typically gonna be in memory. I can try to stream it directly when I receive it from you on disk, but it's difficult. And in some server setups, I don't have access to a local disk, even for Scratch purposes. So it's complicated, essentially. And you may think, that receiving a file and holding it in memory is not a big deal, right? But it is a big deal, because some of these serving environments for the cloud are optimized, or they can be run a lot cheaper, rather, if you can run them with a small amount of RAM. So imagine that, imagine you're writing a version of Code Grader, and somebody may decide that they want to upload a 100 gigabyte file because it's a movie class, and they're developing movies. Or maybe somebody is really sloppy and they built an app in which they include a really large database, and it's a 1 gigabyte app. You don't want people to upload these very large files, and you have to worry about storing them temporarily before you can put them to GCS, right? You don't even want to be limited by your bandwidth. Your servers are expensive. Better offload the requests to Google or Amazon servers. So what I want to do is this. I want to build an app in such a way that when I click on this button and I have to choose a file to upload, I also ask my server for a signed URL. I will explain you in a moment what it is, but it's a URL that carries permission to upload the file directly to the cloud. So it will be the browser who uploads to Google Cloud the file. The file will not go through my server, okay? The interaction will be this, essentially, that when you want to upload a file, you will ask my server for authorization. My server will give you the authorization in the form of a URL you can use to upload. You will upload the file to Google Cloud, and once you are done with that, you will notify my server that you have uploaded it, so that I know that the file exists, okay? So this is very nice, and we will go through the code for doing it. It has only one problem, that when you will access via JavaScript Google Cloud Storage, this will be a request that is not a same origin request, because you have loaded the site from localhost 127.0.0.1, and your JavaScript is now trying to do access, get or post or delete or whatever it is, to another host, which is the Google Cloud Storage host. The Google Cloud Storage host will be happy to help you, but you need to configure it so that your bucket accepts requests not from the same origin, okay? Because this browser page will send it requests that come from another origin. The browser's page origin is this one, 127.0.0.1, and that will be where the request is coming, okay? Not from the domain of the Google Cloud Storage. So what you need to do is you need to configure coarse permissions, as it is called, on this bucket. You can configure these permissions to do cross-origin requests on a per bucket basis, and you need to configure it for this bucket. So how do you do it? I wrote it in the README file, and you need to do the following, okay? You need to say, gsutil is one of the tools of the Google Cloud. You need to say gsutil course set course JSON file.json, which is a file in which I specify the permissions to your bucket name. In this case, it would have been like Luca teaching uploads. This course JSON file, I have it for you in the code repo, and is a file that says something like this. From any origin, okay, set this response header, which is content type access controller allow origin, and the methods I allow are going to be these ones. So get, put, post, options, delete, basically all the methods I'm going to use. And the max age seconds is a max age for requests. I don't know actually what it is. I just, you know, Google Cloud gives you a file that you need to use, and I used it, and I have no idea what the max age seconds is. Because a request happens quickly, so I have no idea. But you know, whatever they had in mind is fine. I don't care. Okay, so you give that command, and this sets up the permission on the bucket. This is important, and the reason I explain it in detail is important because it's a step that is incredibly easy to overlook. And so you have a perfectly functioning app that fails for a very mysterious permission problem that is not documented in, I mean, that is not like easy to diagnose particularly, because when the app fails, what happens is that you can see that your request is sent to the Google Cloud fine, but the response is then to that is then not loaded by the browser, and it's somewhat you know, hidden. I mean, is not very clearly stated the reason. So it's a sort of gotcha that you can have. Okay. Notice that to use a GSUtil on a Mac, there is a bug due to Python versions, so I had to set an environment variable. These are details, you can look at them. Okay. So this is the setup portion. Create a Google Cloud project, enable billing, create your storage bucket, create the service account and give it permission to the bucket, and then in the end, configure CORS on the bucket. It sounds like a lot, but once you know that these are the steps, it probably takes you like 10 minutes to do them, okay? So now, up to the code. What do I want to do in the code? Okay, so I wrote the code as a component. I'm not sure that it's the best way to write it, and I'm exploring a new way to write components, but you know, it seems a reasonable way for me to sort of encapsulate this interaction. As I teach it now, I realized that I should have prepared some slides that show this interaction, but I would have to describe it through code, unfortunately. Is there any question before I dive in the code and explain you how this works? So roughly what I want to do is the following, okay? I want that this gives you the choice of a file to upload. Let me see a moment, actually. How much I hate Zoom, stupid controls. Oh God, I think I'm going completely nuts. Okay, good. So there is product images, okay? So I should be able to choose an image or choose a file to upload. I'm choosing images in this moment, okay? So far, this is completely local and the browser hasn't asked anything yet. When I do specify a file and the file exists, I wanted to ask my server for the authorization to upload something to the Google Cloud, okay? So when I click this, my server will ask for the authorization to upload it to the Google Cloud. It will receive it and it will send it to the Google Cloud. At this point, I have it here uploaded, and I should be able to click here, and it downloaded my rubber duck. So I can open it and view my rubber duck. Okay, so if I open it, it should show me my rubber duck. Okay, very nice. Okay, so essentially, I want that when I choose the file, I don't ask for any permission yet. This because if I ask for permission every time people click here and cancel, I would be wasting the permission. And when I ask the permission to upload, I receive a URL that I can use to upload the file. When the upload is successful, I want to notify my server that the upload has taken place so that the server can know that the file has been uploaded and maybe store it somewhere that is useful, okay? And once the file is uploaded, this particular component gives you the right to download the file and to delete it, okay? So before I oh well, I should give a I should improve this. I should make sure that if I click somewhere else, then this does not yeah it re-asks for the permission. So first of all, let me see if the file was really uploaded in the right place. So if I go to look at teaching uploads, I see a file that has a random name. It's an image JPEG. And if I click on it, it will be in fact my rubber duck. Okay, so the file actually exists. And if I delete it now, we will upload it again for rubber duck. If I refresh, I should see that there is nothing left, okay? So let's look a moment at the code that I use in order to pull this off. I tried to write this nicely because I wanted to use it, you know, in my real applications. And so I'm passing you the code, but I think I will be using it over the summer if I rewrite CrowdGrader. The code works a little bit as follows. Let's look at the JavaScript first. Okay, so I have a bunch of URLs. Sorry, I'm just struggling with Google, with Zoom controls. I want to show you the HTML first. So there is essentially div with the class field has a DON that contains some paragraphs with the class control. And this is basically, if you read the instructions of Bulma, which I'm starting to like after a while, what gives you the nice layout for these controls here, okay? And so when you click on upload new file, what you do is essentially you trigger this event listener to upload file. So upload file is what triggers the file upload. And let's go see how this is actually implemented. When you call upload file, you do various things. So first of all, this function is passed the event of your click, and the input element is the event.target. This is a bit unpleasant. I wish there was a more Vue-like way of doing these via Vue model, etc. Instead, you have to manually retrieve from the event the target of the event, which is the file selector on which you actually clicked, and fish out the file out of it. I don't like it, okay? But it's the way it is. If somebody clicked on a file, because, you know, it could also be that people clicked on cancel and that, you know, there is no file to be found or whatever else. So, but if there actually is a file and this works, what you do is this. I set the uploading is equal to true, which just changes something in the UI to show me, you know, the spinner button to denote that the upload is going on, okay? But then I started the serious business. I get the file type, and the file name out of the file. And then I request the cloud for I request my server for the permission to upload. So I call a method, access post. I call a method via post. It could have been a get, but, you know, I prefer a post here. Anyway, you know, the time is going to be dominated by the time to upload the image, not really by the time to do a post versus get. So here I ask for my URL that I use to ask for upload URLs, and I say, please give me a URL through which I can do a put action, so I can put a file up in the cloud for this particular MIME type of file type. When you upload files to the Google Cloud, the URL you get is authorized for a particular operation, and if you wish, for a particular file type. And so here I'm asking essentially the authorization, hey, please, can I upload a file of this type? Yeah, can I upload, given by the put, a file of this type? Once I get from my server the result, I'm given an upload URL that I can use for the upload. And I'm given also a file path that I can use to communicate to the server. Okay, and then I do the following. There may be other ways, but so far we have been using Axios as a library to perform uploads. But to perform file uploads, I actually prefer to use the basic browser library that I think I must have shown you at some point in the past. Okay, because it gives me more control of the headers and more control of how to do the streaming upload. Maybe they have improved the access, but the library I used to use up to last year, which was part of jQuery, wasn't working nearly as well. So I do the following. Once I have the authorization to upload and the URL to upload to Google Cloud, I create a request, an HTTP request to do the upload. Okay. And I perform the request. These two lines here perform the request, okay? This line and this line. So I open the request with a put method to my upload URL that I received, and the request is asynchronous, so that I can, this is a streaming upload essentially, and then I send my file, okay? Now this would upload the file, but think at it from the point of view of my server, okay? There is a browser that has asked me permission to upload a file. Okay, fine, but has the file been uploaded or not, right? My server would have no idea whether the upload succeeded or not. So what I'm doing is this. I want to notify my server when the upload is successfully performed. So to this request here, I attach an event listener. And the event listener listens to the load event, and when it arrives, it calls upload complete. So this is a fairly widespread paradigm in JavaScript, okay? There are some actions that take time. For example, this request send will take time. You want to be notified when that thing is over. So if you look at the documentation of a request, it will send various types of events. There is a load event, there is some error events of various types, there is a start event, there is a bunch of events. You read the documentation, but the most common one that you care about is an event called load, which means that the request has successfully terminated, okay? And you can add listeners to that event. This is a part of that has been a little bit hidden from you in this class, because in this class you typically use this Axios library that has these promises behavior, so that you can do an axios.post, and then you can say .then, and you can say what you do afterwards, okay? But Axios is implemented in terms of XML HTTP request, which is the basic browser library to do all the HTTP requests. And so inside Axios is also implemented in terms of these events, okay? So when the request comes back, when you have successfully uploaded the file, you call this upload complete, okay? In which you say, I uploaded this file name, this file type, and I uploaded it to this file path, okay? Let me perform the upload so that I can tell you what the file path is. Oh, actually, let me perform the upload while keeping up the oh, and I want to pass you a suggestion, actually. You will be very happy. So we want to keep an eye on the networks tab, but I wanted to show you that, and every time this is screwed up, if for some reason I cannot believe. One moment. I can grab this tab and put it where it belongs. So my suggestion is this. There is a Vue extension available for Chrome that you can install. And once you install it, it gives you in your inspection panel also something that helps you debug Vue components. So if you click on a Vue component, you can now see its properties and its data, okay? Which is really handy for debugging. and which probably would be useful to you for developing homework 7. Yes, Milo?
Is there anything similar for Firefox?
Yeah, there is one also for Firefox. In fact, I have it installed also on Firefox. I prefer the Chrome debugger, you know. I don't like Chrome as a browser for general purpose. I prefer Firefox, actually, is my favorite at the moment. You know, there are periods of my life in which I switch between one and the other browser. I mean, the reason is utilitarian. I think Firefox has a smaller memory footprint, and I keep a lot of tabs open. But there is an equivalent one for Firefox. And I cannot tell you about Safari. Safari has fewer extensions, so I'm not quite sure. Okay. Yeah, so this is very convenient because you can examine the state of your component easily. Okay, so let's look at what happens. When I click on upload new file, here, you know, nothing much happens. Then sorry, I don't want to do this. I want to show you the network first instead. Okay, I want to show you all the requests from the network. Okay, so suppose I uploaded a new file. Again, this rubber duck. Okay, so this is the sequence of stuff that happened. This is my URL to ask for the upload permission, okay? So the headers said, I want to do a put of an image JPEG. Okay, I hope you can read it well from the bottom of the screen. Yeah, this does not help. Okay, so I want to do a put of an image JPEG. Is this big enough? The font, maybe this is better. The response is, this will be the name of the file you upload. It will be in the Luca Teaching Uploads bucket, and it will be this random name. And this is the signed URL that you can use for the upload. And the signed URL is a big, big, big mess that I will explain you how to create. Okay, so this is a response. Great. Once you do that, you take this signed URL that gives you permission to do the upload, and you do the upload to it. So this is a request. You failed to load the response data. Oh God, I wonder what it is. But it succeeded somehow. Yes, it succeeded. Okay, it's a put request and succeeded. And I don't know why this is not so clear. Failed to load the response data. I don't know whether there was no response data. Response headers. Let's look at them. You see access control allow origin star, which authorizes the response. Oh, okay, but I think it's just that there is no content. Okay, content length 0. So there is no content in the response, but I got a status 200 and I got all these beautiful headers that I don't know what to do with. Okay. There's an e tag. I mean, I'm sure that they have a purpose. I just don't know it, and I didn't need to care. So, so I just disregarded them. But essentially, this is my upload request. Okay, and the important fact is that. So let me show you a moment. Okay. In this response, I was told that this is the path to my file, to my rubber duck now in the cloud. And my rubber duck in the cloud, you see 25E6. If we go to the Google console, and I refresh, there is 25E6, etc., etc. This is, you know, this is a rubber duck. Okay, so I uploaded the rubber duck under a random name. Once this is done, I will notify my server that the upload has completed, and I will tell it something like this. Deletable is equal to true. I mean, these are things I send because no, this is a response, sorry. What I tell it is something like this. My original file name was rubberduck.jpg. The file type was image JPEG. And the file path, once uploaded on the Google Cloud, has become Luca teaching uploads slash, and then this random path. Okay, so this request is generated by this piece of code. You know, once the upload is complete, I tell my server that a certain file name or a certain file type has been uploaded to a certain path. Okay, and once this notification also goes through, I say that I'm no more uploading. This just changes the button type. I set the results, which is, you know, I get the results from the server that drive the shape of my UI, and I do a log that the upload completed. Okay. So why do I upload to a random name? The problem is this, okay? Rubber duckies may be really popular. I think they are, in fact. And so many people may have a file called rubberduck.jpg, right? So the problem is that in my bucket, the bucket is going to be shared for all my uploads. And so I cannot afford using your file name locally as the name of the file that will be in the cloud, right? I need to keep track. I need to keep track of what the original file name was, so that when you download it, it will be called in the same way. But I also want to ensure that in the cloud, you upload the file to a unique name. And so this is another one of these problems. It may be obvious to many of you, okay? But let me go through it a moment. The problem you have is really, I want to get a unique name. And so there are two ways of doing it, the smart way and the stupid way. And the stupid way is far superior. The stupid way is to just say, well, how do I ensure uniqueness? I have no idea. So let me just get a big random string. And this is what my server does, okay? It generates a random string that you can use as upload name, okay? And this works very well because it's incredibly unlikely that you get a collision. And the probability is so low that it's easier, you know, for my company to go out of business or, you know, many other disasters to strike than actually two of these uploads to conflict, okay? So it's you know, and anyway, we talked in other portions of the class about the fact that this randomness-based uniqueness, essentially chance, is what keeps the whole web working, you know, from the security of your cookies to everything else. It turns out that the random way is the stupid way, so to say. So, you know, there should be a principle that says, you know, use the least amount of intelligence possible. You know, will make your work so much more understandable by everybody else and so much more likely that it actually works. So the stupid way is far superior to the smart way, because how would I be able to cook a unique name for you? Well, you know, I could try, there are two ways essentially. One is that I could cook up a complicated mechanism by which I use your login name attached to something else, you know, and if I get it wrong, essentially I'm toast, right? So this would be one way. For another way, for example, you know, I may think that I'm really smart and I can add your user ID, your username on the site, basically, your user email, whatever I want, to the file name. But then if I want to upload twice two rubber duckies from two different computers, they would go to this, you know, they would go one on top of the other. So it still wouldn't work to attach your user ID to the file name. So whenever you try to be smart, you run the risk of being wrong, right? The other way to achieve unique names would be to have a general, you know, server and check for the existence of the name before you actually give it out to the user. But this will be quite expensive. Randomness is incredibly beautiful because it gives you a completely distributed, very efficient solution to generating uniqueness. You know, it's really incredible. It's remarkable. I don't know. I never stop being surprised by it. Yeah. Okay. So so long speech to say that, you know, that's why the file name is random. So the other functions that yes, Milo.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering where exactly are you actually doing that? Like where are you
We're
adding?
generating these in the Python code of my server that I still have to show you, okay? So
Okay.
I'll get to that.
Ah,
So the other parts of the app are kind of simple, you know? When you want to delete a file, what do you do? Well, you know, it's the same broth in another way. So what you do is, if the file is deletable, you know, my UI, I mean, I try to write actually a nice piece of code because I do plan to use it myself. This is one of these pieces. I don't want to be, how to say, self-boasting, okay? I'm not just saying that this is the best work possible, not at all. But there are some pieces of work that I keep aside and I consider them, you know, small gems, meaning not so much because they're so great and beautiful, but because they save me a lot of time in the future. Uploading files is very common task. Once you have these pieces of code that kind of work, you keep them aside and then you can use them in your apps as you want, right? And this is one of these precious pieces. And so I wanted it to be, you know, this whole UI is driven by some permission flags that you can in fact observe. No, if you click on Vue and click on the component, you can see that in my data I have deletable, writable. So you know you can use these also to allow download only. You can allow upload but not deletion. You can you know you can drive the UI in that way. But if you can allow if you do allow deletion, what you do is this. Um, okay, there is this delete confirmation step that you need to click twice. Then you do a post in which you obtain the deletion URL this time. So this time the action is delete, okay? And I refer to the file via file ID that I'm sent back from the server. In this case, it coincides with the file path because, you know, I have to tell the server which file do I want to delete. And so I use a file ID to say that. I get back a delete URL. I build my request this time to delete. I send it without any file in it. You know, I just want to send it. And when it's sent, I call a deletion complete method that notifies the server that the deletion has actually occurred. Okay, so there is this double step also in the deletion. So it's very similar to that. So let's look at the server component now, if there are no more questions on the client, okay? So the client does this essentially. Each time it needs to upload or delete, it does this double step, or triple step really. It asks for the upload or deletion URL, performs the upload or deletion, and then notifies the server that it succeeded, okay? Now, in my server component, I wrote it, by the way, in such a way that this is not driven by any database table. As usual, you know, you can override my code and store in a database table that a particular user has uploaded a particular file, you know, but this I didn't do it. I just wanted to write a generic component that then you can use in any app. So I didn't want to make assumptions about the database. I just store in the session, which is a bad idea, but just for, you know, just to make the app work. And so it works in this way. So I wrote a function many years ago, I think many equaling 6, that gives you a GCS URL and takes you, so it gives you one of these signed URLs. It takes the keys for signing, okay, that you read from that JSON file. It takes the path you want to do, which is, you know, this URL that starts as /Luca teaching / and then this random name. It takes a verb, which is get, post, put, delete. It takes an expiration time, so my URL will not be valid forever. It will be valid for some time. When I grant you the permission to do a certain operation, I don't grant you indiscriminate permission throughout time. I grant it to you for a certain period. This is always a good idea because um, because permissions can change on the server. You may decide, for example, that the user is now banned from the system. So you wanted these permission URLs, once they are out there, they work. So if I send you, for example, a permission URL to view a certain file, and you have that URL somewhere, for example, in an email that you forward to your sister, she can look at the file. And if I want to, the URL is valid, even if I remove your user account. Okay, the only thing that limits the validity of the URL once you generate it is this expiration time. So you have to use something that is not infinite. I think that, for choosing these expiration times, I'm sorry that I go through so many details, but I don't know if it's useful. Maybe somebody should tell me that I'm too verbose or not. But the two things I noticed in practice when using these expirations is the following. If you choose it too long, if you boot out a user from your system, the access persists for too long. This may or may not be important, right? But in general, it's a good security measure to make sure that things are not accessible for too long after a user is no longer allowed or active or whatever. The lower bound on the expiration URLs is this. Suppose you are building an image gallery, okay? And so I load a screen full, or actually a couple of screens fulls of my images of my, I don't know, latest hike I did. Great. No? Now I have them in my browser. So my browser has downloaded all these URLs to access the images. Okay? Maybe I keep that window open. I go to dinner, I have a really long dinner, and at the end of the dinner, I say, hey, look at the photos I took yesterday. Okay, and so you're looking again in a browser window at images that are loaded from URLs that were authorized with an expiration, okay? If those URLs have expired, you cannot reload the images. They may not refresh properly, okay? So you have to essentially give URLs out that have a lifetime that is long enough to people to view your web page comfortably without without needing to refresh just to get a batch of fresh URLs. I don't know if this makes it clear, sort of. Okay. So there are some sites that when you close your phone and you reopen it, you see that all the images are broken. And it's because the URLs to load the images were signed for too short a time, and when the phone automatically tries to reread the same page it has received because it threw away from the cache, everything fails. Okay, so that's essentially the lower bound on the URLs. Anyway, so this is the function that I know works and signs URLs. Okay. Now, of course, when I was preparing this class, I almost had a fit because I was reading the following, that, and computer science is really beautiful for that, right? So if you go to the signed URL, where should you use a signed URL? And you find out that there is not actually one way to generate a signed URL. That would be too easy. So there are at least 3 ways. You can use with HMAC, which works compatibly with Amazon and whatever. There is the V2 and there is the V4. And in November, there was this beautiful situation in which V2 signing with the service account authentication, okay? You can go here, and here it tells you, it's so beautiful. Important. This is legacy material. It will be deprecated, but we don't tell you when, okay? So this is the way that is already old. And now the way that is new, which is V4, now it works, but up to a few months ago, the V2 was already not recommended and V4 was not stable yet. And this reminds me, there was a running joke when I was at Google, that there are 2 versions at least of the same thing, the deprecated version and the version that doesn't quite work yet. Okay, and this was a running joke because it was accurate actually. Okay, and okay, fine, it's besides me. So I'm using essentially the old signing mechanism because I decided that I don't have any really good reason to switch to the new one. But if you want to use the new signing mechanism, there are various ways of doing it. And the most beautiful way that I found, if you want to use a new way, is to do it, to create a signed URL with the Google Cloud Storage tools. I want to show you what happens when you create it with your own program, just to show you how horrible the code is. If you want to read some really bad code, you can read the Python example of how to do it. I mean, this is the code for signing a URL from here to here. And if you read it, it's just bad. It's just badly written. It's a mess. It's a sea of statements that somehow fix one thing or the other, format, take out trailing semicolons. I mean, it's an ungodly mess. I don't know how to put it. Okay. Instead, if you use the Google Cloud Storage tools, which is what I would recommend, it's much more beautiful. And I don't see a very good reason for not using the Google libraries for doing it. So, wait, where is it? No, not these code samples. Yeah. So, where is it? Oh, this is for Python already. Yeah. So this is very reasonable code instead. You know, it's beautifully written. Generate upload signed URL v4. You get the bucket name and the blob name. And you should really also put the method as input, but as you can see, you know, this is quite a beautiful interface. So they probably wrote a mess inside, but then using these these storage client tools, you know, this storage, which is imported from Google Cloud Import Storage, is the Google API, is the Google library for Python to access Google Cloud Storage. Okay, so this works very well for signing. It's a pleasant interface. So coming back to my code, so now you know there are essentially two documented ways of signing, and I'm using the third one. This is also very typical of the cloud. But this way works, okay? And so what I wrote is I wrote my own fixture. We can go read some of the code at random, okay? So I have these various URLs. I don't want to walk too much in details of this code because I think you can read it by yourselves if you want, but let's look at some pieces of it. So this is a piece in which I give you an upload URL, okay? So I read the action that you want to do. This can be put or delete, and if it's a put, the delete works similarly. I get the MIME type, okay, the type of the file. I generate a path at random. You see, this is where I generate it, self bucket plus this UUID, that is a random string. Okay, I print out, this I should really remove, but I was doing it for testing, okay? And I get an upload URL using my keys to this path, okay, for doing a put for this particular file type. And the expiration, I use the standard, 1,000 seconds in this case, okay? And then I tell you which upload URL I generated and which path I generated. So this code is not very complicated in the end. But the idea is this, you know, I don't wanna waste upload URLs. So if I generate an upload URL, nothing happens on the server, on the Google server. The Google server does not know when I generate an upload URL. I can generate an upload URL via a cryptographic signing mechanism based on my service account. And so I don't expend any resource that I will have to pay for. I just pay for my server time. So when you really need it because you have a file that you want to upload, I give you an upload URL, okay? But I haven't yet stored anything anywhere. Okay, you may decide, you know, you may waste it essentially. But if you notify me that the upload has completed, then I need to write this somewhere, which is very typically a database table, because now I need to remember that your file that you called this way, and if it is of this type, was stored in this particular path. So I extract the important pieces, and normally I would write it to a database. But here I simply write it to the session, and the session is simply the session of the browser, you know, I mean of the browser. It's your user session. And so I'm writing it in the session. This code, by the way, requires, in order to work, a patch that I did to Py4Web. Yes, I had a really bad coding day 2 days ago. The first error that took me a long time to find is that when you write things to the session, the session does not necessarily notice that it needs to be written back to disk or to storage. So I had to do a patch to Python Web, which is not in yet because I wanted to talk to Massimo about the over it, and we were both too busy. But so I haven't made the pull request yet. But we need a method for declaring that the session is dirty and needs to be written back to this to storage. Okay. So this doesn't quite work without the patch, but the patch is needed for many other reasons. So this will be added. And the other really the other thing that happened is that my PyCharm at some point I wanted to change the name of a delete method to notify delete. And instead of changing it only in this file, it changed it in all the files that I had open in any PyCharm that I had open at the time. So, and because I had all my class material open when I was doing these, I had to rewind by hand something like 30 repositories that all were corrupted by this renaming to delete notify. So I spent 1 hour winding back each repo by hand to a sane state. And I spent, probably half an hour to figure out why I was getting these strange notify delete errors from pieces of code where I didn't know that there was any notify delete. Anyway, so I really had a bad day. So if you do your homework and you curse me because the homework is hard, think that I'm having, equally hard time just in a way you don't see, okay? So at any rate, when you give me the notify upload, I take this information and I write it to the session. What I should really do is build have a database table for file uploads that tells me this user has a file with this name of this type and I store it under this path. Okay, that's the table you would need. And I didn't want to create it here because I wanted to just create a generic component and not tied to a particular database table or database type. Okay. This is basically all there is to it. There is nothing else going on here, really. Okay, so I mean, this is pretty much it, what I wanted to show you for uploads. So do you have questions? Or what would you like to do now? I think there was something that I was... Yeah, no, nothing comes to my mind. Yes, Andrew?
So with the cores file we're using to allow this cross-site access, we set it to allow from any URL. In a production application, is that still safe because we're using all this signed URL type
Yes.
stuff, or would you still want to restrict it?
No, you wouldn't want, or you could, but it is safe. Let me go into the details of it, okay? So first of all, why is it safe? It is safe because if you look at the way I set up the bucket, 1 second, where is it? Sorry, I think the Zoom window exactly on top of, yes. So if you look at the bucket and the bucket permissions, okay, you can see that the bucket is not publicly accessible, nor other files in it, okay? So, so even though the bucket has the course permission set up in that way, nobody can actually click on these files. I mean, I can click on them from the console, but if you know the path, in fact, you could try it, you see that this file has an absolute path, right? That is this link URL. I could post it in the chat window. Let me do that for your amusement, okay? I can post it in the chat window and you shouldn't be able to access it. If I could only find my chat window. Where is the chat? I think it's okay, chat 1. Yeah, Milo, you know, it was truly a bad coding day. I think I wasted 3 hours of my time between these 2 bags and some other bag. And you know, one of the most insidious bugs that you have in computer science is that when something below your feet changes that you don't have even any idea why it changed. So the way I wasted so much time on the delete notify is that I was getting an error from the session that it could not be saved because there was a delete notify method that was not existing. Okay. And I was wondering, I know the method does not exist, the delete notify, but why should it even exist? You know, whoever mentions delete notify for a session. And the truth is that Massimo, when he writes the new session information down to storage, calls first delete and then writes the new session information. And and his delete was modified into a delete notify, which of course doesn't exist on a session anyway. So anyway, if you click on this URL, you see that you have no access to it, right? So nobody has access. I have not defined any permission. I think I could add myself as permission to you to have this, but I don't think that even I can access it. So I can try actually, since I'm sharing the screen. And I'm fighting this Zoom window. I think I will develop Zoomitis, a new illness. Oops, what do I do? Sorry. But if I cut and paste it here, why do I get it? Wait, can you access it? Can you confirm that you cannot access it?
I can't access it.
You can't?
No, I can't.
Why can I? This is bizarre. It's interesting, but I didn't think I could. Wait, does it really work? I can. Okay, let me trace this because it's interesting. But so a moment. This is why it is safe, okay? Now, could I restrict it? Yes, I could. So I think that in practice, in production, in the course file that contains these, for example, I haven't used the Google Cloud Storage for CloudGrader. CloudGrader uses, of course, right? Because now you know how the world works. Something that is called the blob store that works perfectly, except that now is so deprecated that it's not even documented. Okay, but it used to be when it was when it was created about 6 years ago, the new shiny thing that was what everybody ought to use, right? And so and so fine. But if I were to use these for CloudGrader, I would probably put here a list of sites. The problem is that CloudGrader is served from a few URLs, but I would put something like peer.cloudgrader.com and www.cloudgrader.org at least. Okay. Yeah, I know I froze. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening. I mean, yeah, I usually have good internet, but it has become occasionally glitchy. So I was telling you that for CloudGrader, I would probably specify my site. That would be something like www.crowdgrader.org or maybe, but you see, it's a pain because I might actually leave it like this because I also use these app engine URLs such as crowdgrader.appspot.com in order to test the CloudGrader. And if I put here too restrictive a set, then I wouldn't be able to check it from those sites. So I don't know whether I would actually restrict it. Now, why do I have access? Why can I load these? This is very surprising to me, but let me try to debug it, okay? So console cloud google.com. Why do I have access? I don't have a super good idea. And this is one of these non-fun things to chase, but I think that my suspicion is that if I look at teaching uploads, no, sorry. If I look at teaching uploads at the permissions, among these permissions, it must be this one. Viewers of projects Luca teaching. So because I logged in as Luca De Alfaro can have have this legacy permission, has this permission. You know, I'm an owner of the project, and so that's why I'm the owner of the project. If I tried to do it, you know, my browser communicates to it via because this is console cloud google.com, and I am logged in into gmail.google.com. The browser knows who I am, and so when I access that URL, which is here, storage cloud google.com Luca teaching, then I authenticate to this URL via my Google identity. I'm the owner of the project Luca teaching, and so that's why I can see it. I think that's a chain of events. Okay, so my browser is sending cookies that enable to do that. But you see, a quick way to check it would be that I get this URL, get any window, and type something like well, okay, let me do something else. I go to a temporary place, okay, and then I do, for example, wget or curl, okay, and this tells me that it cannot verify the certificate. This is bizarre. I wonder if it's just my wget that has an old list of certificate authorities, and Google created their own certificate authority. But this is kind of bizarre. Let's see whether curl gives me the same error. What did it do? Did it do anything? No, I don't think so. Anyway, yeah, by the way, at some point I think I should talk to you about domain names and how these certificates work. Anything else you would like to do in this class? This is basically what I wanted to show you. Maybe it has been a long-winded class, but I wanted to go through all the various details of why I'm doing things in a certain way and not another. Yes, Andrew?
You mentioned you were going to talk about the updates to components and your thoughts of changing that.
Yes. So this is an optional part of the class. But you know that I discussed with many of you, and with Andrew in particular, that sent me a suggestion. I've been incredibly busy these days, unfortunately, due to some deadlines I have and due to these, you know, coding mistakes that maybe made me waste many hours. And so I have looked in part at what Andrew suggested. And I think that I'm following the gist of what he said. And I have a new style component that works, and not in an incredibly elegant way. I showed it to Massimo. Massimo said that he likes it, but wants to make a suggestion for a change. I don't know any complicated story. I hope that Massimo and I will get time to talk over the weekend, because before we are both too busy. But I want to show you one prototype of thing that works and that is interesting. Okay, so the prototype is, I tell you where it is so that you can comment on it if you like. Okay, so if you go to oh goodness, I'm fighting the Zoom controls essentially that pop out whenever you go close to them, right? So let me show you a moment. If you go to GitHub and you go to look at the FirePy for web. Okay, I have here a code branch that is called Luca. No, it's called sorry. Try new style components, where I'm trying this new kind of code. Okay, so you can go to this branch, and this is a branch of Py4 Web. I haven't made a pull request. I want to discuss it with Massimo, as I mentioned first. But you go in the examples, app and you go into the components, and the one I modified is essentially the star rater, which is the simplest. You know, I took the star rater component and I wrote a new kind of star rater component 2 days ago. Let me show you the code of what I did, which is in part, I think, what Andrew wanted or suggested, but with some slight, perhaps, twist. Okay? And so I did the following. Let me find it a moment. Examples, components, and let me show you the star rater. So the goal of these was to use, to achieve a component that can be instantiated in Vue. The real drawback of the components, as I have been doing them so far, is that they can get created on the server, but not in Vue, because the current components contain the callback URLs. And the callback URLs, it's easy to generate them in the server, but you cannot generate them in Vue. So I wanted to obtain a star rater component that I could simply insert like this. The only thing it has is an ID that communicates back to the server which of the various star raters on the page this one is. Okay? So that's what I wanted. The question is how to pull it off. And it turns out pulling it off is very easy, except for one nasty detail. And the nasty detail is, how do I tell the JavaScript where the callback URL, what the callback URL is? Since I don't want to put it in the template here anymore, where do I put it, right? And the answer is that maybe I can insert it in the JavaScript that comes at the bottom of the page. Okay? And so the ID is here. And the ID is used by the component when it talks back to me. I can show you the code a moment of how the component talks back to me. Where is it? It's in static components, star rater, JavaScript. So, you know, when the JavaScript needs to talk to me via set stars, it uses a set URL and it gives me back the number of stars and the ID. It couldn't be simpler than this. So the ID, instead of leaving it as part of the URL like once upon a time, is simply one of the things that, you know, the star rater tells me. It's fine, you know, it works great. The only problem, as I was mentioning, is how do I pass the URLs? So it turns out that the star rater is a fixture, okay? A fixture is one of these classes, if you look at the definition, that has on request, on error, on success, and transform. So a fixture actually has the right to transform the output of a particular page, right? So this is why, this is how templates work, right? A template transforms a dictionary into an HTML page. That's a pretty big transformation. What I wanted to do was a somewhat smaller transformation. I just wanted to inject somewhere some JavaScript variables, okay? So in my transformation, I do the following, okay? I generate my URLs, my get and set URLs to communicate with the server, okay? And then I generate by hand. I know that this is a little bit horrible, okay? Maybe there is a better way to do it. I think this is where Massimo had his hairs raised. But, you know, I was in a hurry and this works, and I'll clean it up later. So basically, I generate, let star rater URLs is equal to, and then I say, get URL is equal to whatever it is, and set URL is equal to whatever it is. So I generate a script block that contains the declaration in JavaScript of my variables, of my callback URLs. And then I attach it to the output as a piece of dictionary called the star rater URLs. And in a template, this is really what Massimo doesn't like, but I don't know if there is a much better solution. So in the template for the star rater, I have this line that spits out that block of variables. So that when you go look at the page, when you go look at the page, 1 second, okay, it's 127 examples, okay, and then it's the star rater. Sorry, I'm haunted by this Zoom thingy. Star rating, okay, so if you look at this example, if you click on inspect, okay, and look at the page source, okay, this is the original page source that was loaded. Wait, this is it. And if you look at the original page source, you see that there is this portion here, okay, and this portion here, let star rater URLs is equal to, okay, get URL and set URL. This is the portion that is generated by my code. Okay, is output here and is generated here in the transform. Okay, so now my JavaScript of the star rater, when it initializes variables, will know that in these star rater URLs, it can find the get URL and set URL. These are global variables. So what I can do in the JavaScript is simply say, get URL is equal to star rater URLs get URL. And similarly for the set URL. So those are the magic lines that I use. Okay. So this all works. It contains 2 rough edges. I mean, I achieved my main goal, which is a component that I can insert both from Vue or from the server. So I think it's quite beautiful, and I think this works very well. But it has a couple of rough edges, okay? The first rough edge is, I mean, this code is only partially beautiful. And the second rough edge is that really, and I think that this is what, I think Massimo told me that he has a suggestion, but I don't understand how it works. So we need to discuss it. There is a better way to do this. The reason, I mean, this is both pretty and nasty, you know? One of the things I don't like, essentially, is the following, if I had a better solution. Once I generate a component to be included in the page, I would like to be done with it, server side. I don't want to have to specify in a template the style sheets and the JavaScript and the variables for each one of the components I need to use. You see, this page is generic, except that for every component I use, I need to insert these 3 lines: a style sheet, source JavaScript, and declaration of the callback variables, okay? This is not too terrible, but it's a bit annoying, right? Because I have to remember for each component I use in the page to have these 3 lines. Otherwise, the component doesn't work. It's not terrible, but it's not incredibly pretty. Is there a way to avoid it? I don't know yet. But so we are, that's a topic for discussion for the weekend, essentially. So that's what I did. Andrew, was this similar to what you asked me to do?
Yeah, it was very similar.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand how the transform function worked, so I did it a different way. But besides that, it was extremely similar.
Yeah, is your voice any better? Because I read your suggestion, as we say, in diagonal. That means a bit quickly because I was in a hurry. Was it better? Did it look better to do it in another way or not?
The only real difference was I used dot format type stuff for building the script blocks, and I just built it as a multi-line string so that you would have all of it in one area and then just mass insert as necessary. But
no, yeah, that's better than what I've done. That I grant you. It's way better than what I've done. Okay, these ways, I don't know, really, you know, I was in a hurry and I just blurted it out. But then what did you do with the script block? Did you have a better way to add it to the output, or?
No, I just in the dictionary I just put it in manually. because
I
I
see.
wasn't sure how to automatically add it.
I see. So yeah, I read your email, and this was sort of my interpretation of how to do it after we, with that. So, and what Massimo is suggesting that we do, and then I cut the recorded part of the class, but Massimo is essentially suggesting that maybe there is a way to have a single way to discover all the components you're using in a page and adding this kind of information for all three of them. Okay, and he has something in mind, and I don't know yet what. So I want to discuss with him a moment what he has in mind. It would be nice if there was a place where components can say, hey, I exist. Can you please include these 3 lines in the template somewhere, right? I don't quite know how to do that. And the problem is really that you can always shoehorn something into Python Web, right? Because you can always say, oh, there is a special case of the template where this should happen. But the harder thing is to enable this to work with the current Python Web, which is very simple. We don't want to attach band-aids to Python Web to make these behaviors work, right? You see what I mean? We want to keep the beauty of and the simplicity of the underlying framework. So so anyway, we will see how this progresses. Okay, but so thank you, Andrew, for your suggestion, and this was essentially the implementation I gave to it. Let me stop the recording, and we can chat for a little while.